Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very emotional moment for Filmfest München, for me personally as the artistic director. We're here to honor an artist who has both so much success as a director and as an actor, and he's bringing us his new directorial work here to Munich tonight. But before he's here to talk about his career, please welcome with a big applause, Ralph Fiennes.
Thank you very much.
Well, this filmmaker's life is of course open to your questions, but I'm very glad to open up the discussion and start actually from the very beginning, because I must say that I was very surprised to read that there runs a cultural and arts vein runs through your whole family, and that started from your parents and led to. Thank you very much for the water, Mr. Fiennes. Thank you very much. This should be my. Thank you. So, and meaning that many of your siblings are in the arts, as are you. So, would give us a portrayal, if you want to, about the home you grew in the sense of like the cultural environment.
Well, my mother was a key figure in this, in answering your question. My mother was a novelist. She published 2 novels before she was 22, I think. And she met my father, who was then a farmer. And she was passionate about literature and the visual arts, and she painted a bit as well. And so I think it was totally natural for her to, when she had children, apparently the story goes that a woman, she was working part-time for a gallery owner in an eastern coastal part of England, East Anglia, a woman called Iris Birtwistle. Iris introduced my mother, who was looking after her 3 adopted sons while she was writing, to my father. And my father, we had this very unfortunate long name called Twistleton Wickham Fiennes, which I don't use. But my mother, when she heard that she was being introduced to Mark Twistleton Wickham Fiennes, she thought, this guy is going to be monstrous, some sort of inbred upper-class person. And then my father was actually a very well-built, vigorous, physically fit man. And I think he said he was a rough diamond. Anyway, in walked this rough diamond, and my mother was smitten. She made him an omelette, and he fell asleep. And then the next day, apparently, she got on her little scooter and drove to the farmhouse where my father lived and arrived on her scooter, and he greeted her and said, "Would you like to come in for a dish of tea?" And she said, "Yes, please, and I'd like 6 children." Or something like that. She was very upfront that she wanted 6 children, apparently. This is the myth that they perpetuated, this story. So anyway, they get married, and I'm the eldest, and I think my mother was always, she loved literature, art, and it wasn't a pretension, it was something that was just in her. So we grew up with an atmosphere of always having access to drawing things, painting things. None of us, I have one brother who became a musician. None of us, I think we were offered piano lessons, but that didn't work. But visual artistic expression and games, a variant of charades, which involved acting and improvising, was also part of our party life, I suppose. So I think, in essence, my mother had a belief that every child should be encouraged to pursue whatever path or imaginative quest that child felt. But being an artist, being a writer, she had a strong arts bias. So, but I'm very proud to say that my younger brother Jacob, who's the twin of Joseph, the actor. Jacob is actually not in the arts field. He's working in environmental land management. And he's in the forefront of his field in looking at ways to conserve and environmentally protect the land while still enabling effective agriculture. So anyway, that's a short history of...
It sounds like a perfect recipe found within your family for education. You were first, as you said, there was always means there to paint, and what I gathered or read at least was that you were first attracted to painting as a form that would kind of mean a path into fulfillment as an artist or a way. That was the first point. Is that true?
Yeah, I think at school I was not particularly academic, and I was my art painting was the area where I felt most comfortable. I wasn't that good at English. I liked history. I quite liked French. But after that, I was hopeless at sciences, hopeless at mathematics, not great at sport, and I was quite good at acting. But it was the art room. I was at a small, what we call a grammar school, where the English educational system used to be divided. Still are a few grammar schools, but it was a divisive system, considered to be a divisive system, where the children at around 11 took an exam, and the ones who passed a certain IQ test went to the grammar schools, and the other students went to the secondary moderns. And then it was all changed into the comprehensive system. But I went to a grammar school. In fact, we had travelled around as a family. We moved from East Anglia to southern England, and then we moved to Ireland in the early 70s and came back again to Dorset, Wiltshire, which is about 80 miles southwest of Salisbury. I went to a grammar school in Salisbury. And I was in the art room, and my art teacher was a wonderful man called Duncan Davies, who enabled me and encouraged me to pursue painting and drawing. And then I went to art school, at Chelsea Art School, which is a well-known London art school, to do a foundation course. And the foundation course was designed, it was a year-long course which was designed to, so people coming from regular school came with this notion, I want to be an artist or something. But the foundation course was the sort of conduit where you could try your hand at photography or sculpture or three-dimensional design or graphic design or fashion, textiles. So you were given the gamut of artistic visual expression to try, and then within the year you had to decide where you would specialize for a degree. I had a vague notion that I would be pursuing painting, what we call fine art. But in the course, because the course was designed to sort of shake you up and provoke you and stimulate you, and because I was in London, I'd left Salisbury, and my parents were living in London, so London, of course, was exciting and sexy and full of possibilities. And so something about the combination of the course and being in London, I sort of revisited what I thought my career ambition quest might be, and it was suddenly very clear to me. Well, what happened was this. I know this is how I became certain or clear, I suppose. I was asked by a teacher to do a transcription of Las Menenias, this Velázquez painting, famously transcribed or translated by Picasso. But he said, have a go at this. Here's his famous classic Spanish painting. Do your version of it. Just mess it around. Play with it. Play with the ideas in the picture. So I did, and I ended up cutting out the figures, like in 2 dimensions. And if you look at the painting, there's a dwarf, there's a dog, there's the young girl, in the small young girl with the pale face, and in the background there's a doorway with the figure of the painter, I believe. So they're all in perspective. And if you cut them out, and they actually present themselves as a piece of staging. And of course, I cut them out, and I did put them in sort of 2D, and they looked like my toy theatre that I had when I was younger. And that I guess I had a nostalgic sense of it woke something up in me, and I thought, oh, I know what I want to do. I'll do stage design. That's it. So then a helpful teacher at the course said, well, why don't you go and look at a stage design course so you know what it's about? And he made an introduction to me to a former student of the foundation course who was in fact doing a stage design course, and I met this very charming young man. He showed me the stage design course at the Central School of Art and Design, and I saw these wonderful sets that the students were making at the theatre. And I suddenly had this very strong feeling that I didn't want to design, I wanted to be on the stage. And that was it's very clear. I just thought that's what I should do. And I had acted at school, and I kind of had a basic instinct that I was comfortable with text on a stage with spoken word. So I told my mother, I think I want to be an actor. And it was as if she was waiting for me to say that. And she said, and so then she said, well, you must go and act then, go and do it. Go and explore what courses there are. Obviously, there are the famous courses at RADA and Central School. But in the meantime, I joined an amateur youth company, a youth group in Fulham, which is near Chelsea in London. And that was the first when I auditioned for that company, and I got to play Romeo for this young youth group. And I think that's when I got confidence that I had something I wanted to pursue. And then I auditioned for drama school and so on.
And of course, please. So, and of course, then come the theatre successes of the 80s. Still, I wanted to just add one more detail regarding painting, because if you look at The Invisible Woman, your second work as a director, The Horse Race, for example, is a mass scene that is so painterly. Or if you look at The White Crow and Rudolf Nureyev standing in front in the Louvre of a painting by Géricault, a very important painting, which I can't traduce now. Medusa is in it, but I don't have the English title. The Raft of the Medusa. The Raft of the Medusa. So I feel that painting is still one of the very big inspirations that you probably use in preparation of your films, and how they probably...
Yes, well, in fact, that scene in The Invisible Woman, which is at the races, is inspired by a famous Victorian painting called Derby Day by a painter called Frith. And that was a key reference. But actually, it was one of you have ideas as a director about how you will shoot something, and sometimes you chuck them away because you realize they don't work. But in that one instance, I had this, there was a horse race. It was a true story. Dickens pursued this young actress to the horse races in Doncaster in the north of England, and he tried to create a coincidental meeting with this young girl. So in our script, we have a horse race. We have a limited budget. So I think, how am I going to convey the excitement of a crowded field of people and horses? And I know we don't have long, we have limited extras. And so a little bit inspired, I think, by maybe subconsciously, because I didn't look at My Fair Lady, but there is an effective horse racing scene in My Fair Lady, which must have sat somewhere in my memory. But I just had this idea that the camera starts on a pavilion, on a flag, and it pulls back, and it reveals Nellie standing up in a carriage, and then Dickens, and then people. And the people are all seemingly frozen. And then they're leaning on, and then you reveal the rail on which the people lean as they look, and they're looking to see as the horses come round. And I had this idea, I didn't think it would work, but actually, on the day, thanks to our Rob Hardy, our brilliant cinematographer, we were blessed, and this idea worked. We had 5 horses, and we had to train our extras, our crowd, to I think they watched a pole being walked around the course by an assistant director, which was their eye line, and then the signal was given for the horses to rush through frame. But on the day, what was really fantastic was that it was quite a cloudy day, but suddenly a shaft of light came down and hit Felicity Jones, who was standing, like this light from heaven. And we got the take. So that was from a painting.
Beautiful. Well, you named Felicity Jones now, and I want to make another connection probably between your films, because it seems you have a keen eye for having new talent, young actors, new faces in a way that is long before Felicity Jones became a greater international star, more and more so. The same is true for Oleg Invenko now playing Nureyev, which implies, probably there was more of a risk because he's a trained dancer and not an actor. But do you see that connection, that you want to find somebody very fresh and that's the most important thing, to find somebody for the young roles that's very special, that's very new? I mean, basically, it's a question, of course, about casting. But I wanted to make the connection there.
Well,
it struck me.
It's obviously a good question regarding this film, The White Crow. I mean, having decided to try to tell this story, the first big challenge was who's going to play Rudolf Nureyev. I mean, the film covers him as a young boy, and then from the ages of 17 to 23, from his years as a student in Leningrad until his defection in Paris in 1961. And I obviously I looked at the different ways of doing it, and there are essentially two. One is you find an actor, but then you have to solve the problem of convincing the audience this actor is a good, exciting ballet dancer. And I know that in the film The Black Swan, Natalie Portman did a lot of her own moves, but they also cross-cut her with a body double. And that's quite, it can be effective, but it means you have a lot of coverage and you are giving yourself, I think, a big workload of having to shoot your actor. Obviously, your actor's got to attempt some roles, and then you're going to have to replace in the shot with a body double, and you can't shoot the double's face is going to be an issue, and of course now we have face replacement, which is possible but very expensive. But I sort of saw ahead of me complicated days where I would be frozen with anxiety about how do I cover this and I just thought, if I can find a dancer who can act, and so the face and the body in the screen are properly a dancer's, and he can act, that would be, for me, that would be the right way to go. So we initiated a big casting search. I wanted the Russian characters to speak Russian, and the French character, it was only French and Russian, and one German, East German. So we initiated, having been clear that I wanted a Russian-speaking dancer, we then initiated a big cast through the Russian-speaking dance world with the academies and ballet companies. And certainly I had pressure to consider, very successful and prominent ballet dancers, but I also felt that I wanted to look at who else was out there. I felt an instinct about finding someone unknown. And quite early on, Oleg Yevyenko was on. We noticed him, but after about a 6-month search, we then tested 4 dancers, and he was one of them. And I had a sort of strong feeling in my gut that when I saw his screen test footage, that he was a plausible Nureyev. The camera loves him. He had an instinctive grasp of screen acting. And with the right sort of direction or the right signaling from me, he seemed to suggest something which for me answered what was in my imagination about this young boy. I mean, I've been looking at lots and lots and lots of footage of the young Nureyev. No, I workshopped him again, and then finally we asked him to play the part. I mean, I think I felt if I had a face that no one knew, there would be no baggage of an actor or a famous dancer. It would be totally fresh. The audience there's nothing, the audience don't know this face. They might know Nureyev's face, but this spirit, this new young face would be unknown, and that felt exciting to me. As Nureyev was unknown in our story, it's Nureyev before he's Nureyev. He's not the big star in the film, so that seemed to have a sort of make creative sense for me, that he should be unknown.
And you're playing Pushkin, his teacher. And if you make the connection between the 3 films as a director that you have made, from Coriolanus, playing the strong man of Rome, to playing Charles Dickens, kind of taken a bit more aback to Pushkin, who's really like a wise figure. You could call it passive, but please explain you. I feel that you bit by bit have taken steps to the to the narrating side, I would say it's a wonderful role. It's a wonderful role because this your main actor is so aggressively active, and it plays so well. So how would you say? How does it connect the development of these three roles to your involvement as a director? Does it feel necessary that you want to probably do less in front of the camera ever more as a director? Or is it just pure coincidence, and I'm making this up in my mind?
The sort of the reason I didn't want to be in this film initially, and Gabby Tanner, who's the wonderful producer of this film, is sitting here. So she's very close to all the stories that I'm telling you, and I was very clear to Gabby that I'm not going to act in this film. Yes, I understand you're not going to act in the film. But I did make life difficult for Gabby because I was insisting on this unknown, and I was insisting on a lot of Russian language and not so much English, which also makes it commercially challenging. And I was casting wonderful Russian actors who were brilliant, but not known for distributors, not international names. And I was resistant. I could feel a sort of creeping pressure. As we say, the elephant in the room was that I was not playing Pushkin. And I could see that it was a lovely part. I loved the part. I loved Pushkin. And finally, it was a meeting with a Russian executive producer who said, Rafe, why you not play Pushkin? If you play Pushkin, you get Russian investment. I said, Okay, I'll play Pushkin. But no Russian investment. So I played Pushkin. That's the real. But I mean, I could see it was a great. People ask me about the Russian. I have a little bit of Russian, but the Russian I speak, I had to work very hard to do that in the film.
Oh, that was. And you are from Russia and saying it's perfect. Oh, you speak Russian.
Spasiba.
That was very humble. No, your command of the Russian language is amazing, and that connects to a love for Russian culture very much.
Yes, I mean, I do have and people ask me why. I know that I have some crush on Russian culture, Russian literature, and I think it's. Well, I mean, Russian literature is brilliant about humankind and human condition, and the great writers Tolstoy, Chekhov, Dostoevsky. They lead, for my money, they lead the field in looking at the quandary and the dilemma of being human and the moral complications of being human. I can't. Dostoevsky for me is at a pinnacle of the pain and the agony of what it is to be a human being. But I suppose a sort of more concrete example of my continuing connection to Russia was playing Eugene Onegin. Now, forgive me if you know this, but Eugene Onegin is the principal. Yevgeny Onegin is the principal work of Alexander Pushkin, the great Russian poet, and he's a protagonist, and the female protagonist Tatiana and Pushkin are. They're like Romeo and Juliet. They have that iconic status in Russian literature as those lovers do in English literature, I suppose, possibly. So playing Onegin, but Onegin appealed to me not because he was Russian, because he's Russian, but he exemplifies a kind of sort of cynical disdain about life, which when I was younger I kind of connected to. I liked this sort of removal of himself. But it comes at a cost, which is that he sort of removes himself from any deeper connection of the heart or intimacy. And by the time he realizes that he wants it, it's too late. But doing Onegin, which we shot mostly in England, but a few days in St. Petersburg, I then started to take a few lessons in Russian out of curiosity, and that furthered my real deep curiosity about the Russian soul. And Russians talk about the soul. And that's another reason that it sort of increased my infatuation with Russia. Because when I first went there with a Chekhov production, Rafe, we think you have Russian soul. And I loved it that they talked about soul. I mean, my mum talked about soul, and it seems to me almost a dirty word sometimes when you talk about, in my soul I feel this. but it's a very useful word. I think it expresses, it's not the mind, it's the soul. It's something deeper, more hard to grasp. It's some essence.
There's a lot of soul over there. Yeah.
So anyway, I suppose that, and then I was asked about 6 years ago now, I did a film in Russia for a wonderful Russian actress and director, Vera Glagolieva, who was a famous Russian actress, and she was becoming a director. She had directed a very interesting film called One War, about a group of Russian women coping with the end of the Second World War, who'd been under Nazi occupation, so their fate hung in the balance because they were tainted as being under Nazi occupation. And she approached me. She was doing an adaptation of Turgenev's Month in the Country. So I actually was asked, and I was flattered to be asked to be in a Russian film. And I attempted Russian. I knew. I sometimes wince now as I think of these poor Russian actors who had to hear me mouthing these lines that I had learned, but I knew that I wasn't connecting. I mean, I was saying it, but I knew that I couldn't inhabit the text. But despite that, that was another instance of, I suppose, putting my hands further in and my heart further into some aspect of Russian culture and filmmaking.
This is really open to your question. There's the microphone over there, so please stand up and go there, and we'll immediately take your questions. But please, to the microphone, if you could, so everybody can hear, because it's transmitted.
Have you thought about making or working with your brother Joseph in a movie together if there is a good story coming along?
You have one?
No, not me.
No,
not me.
We've thought about it, and I hope it will happen one day. But we've talked about it. Yeah, thank you.
So, as a director, I wanted to ask you about a common denominator. Please come to the microphone. I will do the next question, and then this is, of course, open to you. Do you have a common denominator in that sense that you take, you could say, eternal stories in a way, or or from Shakespeare or Charles Dickens as a reference, and then kind of they are very contemporary at the same time. And I think that is incredibly important for White Crow, an individual who wants to live in a free society, to express himself. And I think this talks very much to the present times we live in.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I'm responding to this story because the force of Nureev's artistic spirit touches me massively, and I think at some level I relate to it. But I also think that the artist is vital and important as a communicator, as a reflector of us, of who we are. And we want and we need great artists to show us who we are. And give us, and you know, if you must have sat in theatre or film experiences, and you feel that thing where the audience, something inside you shifts, the landscape inside you shifts and realters itself or rearranges itself in your soul. In fact, when you receive this, and I think Nureev, because he's so high definition, of course he comes with all the famous stories about his bad behavior, but there's a kind of uncompromising, pure drive to realizing something inside himself. And that, I find, yes, and ultimately it's about freedom, because it's highly individual, and he comes out of a system which does not tolerate the individual. It's a system based on the principle of there are no individuals, there's only a group. And the group is primary and important, which is a very persuasive argument. But unfortunately, the great artists are individuals. They are unique. And all of us are unique, of course, but we need the artists, the Picassos, the Mozarts, the Beethovens, the Nureevs. They are vital. And this is a film about the young artist, when it's not the famous, successful, it's the emerging thing coiling up inside the young boy that knows he's got to go to this place. And that is freedom. That's a kind of freedom. And we can see places in the world where the artist, I mean, in a way that slightly confirms the artist is still threatening. Kirill Serebrennikov, the Russian director, who did a ballet about Nureyev, is under house arrest in Moscow now, as we speak. Why? He hasn't been formally charged, he's been accused, because I believe he's a potent artist. And he's gay, and his productions are successful, he's highly respected, he's made a film, he can work from home, he's not in a prison, but nonetheless, my interpretation of this is the state saying there are limits. Now that tells me the state is worried, the artist has power, the artist can change, therefore the freedom of the artist is important.
Mr. Fiennes, recently I saw Schindler's List again, and yesterday I saw Coriolanus. This was an outstanding acting of extremely frightening characters. And this wouldn't work without discovering and the revelation of one's own human abyss. You remember the saying, recognize yourself. How did you handle this to discover these inner qualities of your character to do these performances?
Yeah, well, certainly with Armand Goeth in Schindler's List, it was a big opportunity, clearly, for me as a young actor in this story, and I can remember I wanted to immerse myself in what it was to be inside this man's head and what it was to take on board and believe in the ideology which he represents. And he's a human being, and he's working. And there are speeches in the film where, of course, he talks about how exhausting it is organizing the movement of people. And it's a pain, and he has to organize cement and fence posts, I think, or something. But it was a very good script by Stephen Zalian. And Armand Goeth is well documented. And I became very obsessed with trying to get inside this man's head. And of course, at a certain point, it was odd. It was odd because I had to put away the sort of the horror, the revulsion, the sort of silence which sometimes is the only way one can respond to the Holocaust. But I had to be inside this man's head, and actually, I remember my mother saying to me, she said, be careful, because the spirit is still there. And I was a bit surprised that she was speaking like that. But she said she could see me, I think, sort of really trying to sit inside this dark soul. But I think I felt strongly I had to see the world from his point of view to be in it. I couldn't go onto the set and say, oh, this is a bad Nazi. That wasn't helpful to me as an actor. I might have finished the job and felt that, but on the day, I had to feel this was a man who thought that this was the right answer for the world, and what he was doing was right. Then it was fine. And that, of course, is... you can play with it as an intellectual game now, but to sustain it, it was odd to sustain it over 3 months of filming. And so I suppose some days what you call the abyss, I tried to go to the place in myself where I could believe those things. So that's quite a dark place, I suppose. But it wasn't all like that, and there was a wonderful... there was a day which I found very moving when I remember it, which was in Krakow, in the old Jewish quarter of Krakow. Not where the ghetto was, the old traditional ancient quarter. There was a square. And on my first day, I arrived, we were having costume fittings, and I met Ben Kingsley in the costume truck, and I was putting on an SS uniform in a leather coat, and he was putting on a brown suit with a yellow star on the sleeve. But we were actors, we were talking, we were chatting. And I think we had time to kill before we had to be photographed or we had to meet makeup. We walked around our makeup, we walked around together, and then there in the square it said, Old Traditional Jewish Cafe. And Ben said we should go in, and I said, I'm not going in, Ben, wearing this uniform. And the lady in the cafe said, please come in, come in. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not coming in. I will come and visit your cafe, but not today. And then a few weeks later, we were shooting in the square, and it was cold and wet, and we were shooting scenes of the Jewish inhabitants being rounded up or about to be rounded up by the SS. But it was cold, and people had to wait. And we had a lot of the actors who played the Jewish citizens and people were from Israel. And a lot of the actors playing German soldiers were from Germany. And there was a very moving moment because we were suddenly, the production rented out the cafe, which I'd been to a few weeks before, and we were all given tea and cakes. And it was very moving to see the Israeli actors and the German actors in all their costumes talking and chatting and communicating and bonding. And I always thought that was, on so many levels, that was something very beautiful and poetic about that moment.
Hello, I would like to come to contemporary time. You have quite a few projects coming up nowadays, and one of them is Official Secrets. So I wonder what convinced you to participate in it, and what is the challenge of shooting political thriller nowadays?
Yes, this film called Official Secrets. It came out of the blue. It's about to be released in the UK. It stars Keira Knightley as a young lady working for British intelligence just before the Iraq War. And it's very, very well researched, and I think very accurately, authentically portrayed, because she blew the whistle on the fact that she had secret access, classified access to classified information, that the British and American governments were pressurizing some United Nations countries to support going to war in Iraq. And she felt this was wrong, that this was the massaging of the cause to go to war. So she made it public, and she was arrested and charged with breaking the Official Secrets Act. I didn't. It was in the press at the time. I didn't remember reading about it, but the script was very persuasive, and I was asked to play a very interesting man called Ben Emerson, who is a lawyer who takes on very high-profile, difficult causes. In fact, he represented the widow of the Russian spy whose name got out of my head, who died of Levenko, who was poisoned in London. And there was an inquest into his murder, and Ben Emerson represented his wife and spoke very forcefully about his murder. But Ben Emerson takes on a lot of difficult and possibly unwinnable cases, and he took on Catherine Gunn. But the principal role is Catherine, played by Keira, and I took it on because I thought as a film it was strong and truthful about the way governments distort information in order to wage war and do things which are wrong or immoral or not justified. And so it's a story of it's a story of conscience, of a woman's conscience, going, this is wrong, and I will do this, and I will risk my freedom to say the thing that I believe. And it's not. Actually, I have to say, I have not seen the film, but I do know the director was rigorous about the authenticity. So I don't. My sense is it wasn't being massaged into being sort of Hollywood over dramatized in a Hollywood way. Thank you. I hope that answers your question.
Hi. As an acting student, I'd like to know, where do you get your inspiration from when you create a character, aside of the script and the paintings?
Well, I think an actor's imagination, your imagination is your principal tool. And your imagination can be worked all the time. And I think acting is in effect an act of supreme imagination. You imagine everything about your character, their life, their parents. You imagine, but also you can extend your imagination out to all other kinds of areas. And it maybe sound banal, but I mean, to just constantly think and imagine about your character and keep asking yourself questions. I mean, obviously there are forms where I can see there are theatre or cinema forms where you don't play characters anymore, you play something else. But essentially, we're playing versions of human beings from scripts, essentially. And it's quite thrilling to constantly think about, who is this person? Who are they? How do they move? How do they sit, think, breathe? What do they wear? I mean, I love costume fittings. I think everyone in this room, the clothes you're wearing are a statement of you. They're a story of you. So every single person, you've made a choice, which is, when you start to look at that as an actor, when I look at characters, what am I wearing? What is the colour of the tie? What are the kind of shoes? And then there's a ripple effect out from the clothes into who you are. And so the constant asking questions and thinking, I find that's the major tool. Of course, you learn your lines, and if you do an accent, there's an accent to learn, and the director gives. But I think to feel that you have, the police do profiling, don't they? They have to build up an idea of the person they're looking for. And I think they do a version of this. They have to really think and get inside the head of the criminal. They have to really imagine, who is this person? How does he think? Would he have taken a left or a right? Would he have hired a car? Would he have got a taxi? What sort of and I think those are the sort of questions that I find very helpful to ask.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi.
I'm a filmmaker from India.
Hello.
And thank you so much. This is a question about Monsieur Gustav H.
Yeah.
It's actually a two-part question. If you could throw some light about how did you go about preparing for the role of Gustav? And the second question is more from working with the director, who's very meticulous and particular about blocking. How do you work? Can you incorporate improvisation, or how does the set work when you have an idea and you want to try something out, but blocking is very particular?
Okay. Well, Wes Anderson, who made this film, Grand Budapest Hotel, and created the role of Monsieur Gustav H., is very, as you know from his films, is very, very precise and fastidious. But he also loves actors, and you can tell from the company of actors, the actors that continually come back to work for him, that they must enjoy themselves. I mean, Wes had done, actually going back to the other gentleman's, my answer to the other gentleman, very precise designs with his wife about the clothes. And Milena Canonero, who did the clothes, we had a lot of time discussing the color, the feel, the fit of this valet's costume, and the hair and the look of the wave in the hair and the moustache. I got obsessed about my moustache every day. Every hair, I was thinking. So that was, and I think Gustav is, I mean, I have to confess, I'm a bit fastidious myself, and I like the chance to play someone who would be so perfect all the time. I don't know what that says about me, but anyway, I enjoyed it. But I remember, okay, so the blocking, I mean, Wes his camera moves, as you can see, are very, very precise, and so I think of 2 days when this issue might answer your question. One was a shot whereby I had to come into a room, and there was an envelope, and the envelope was in front of me, but the way it was designed was that I had to go, say the envelope is here, and I come in, and I wanted to go like here, here's the envelope, and I read it. But that wasn't the shot. He wanted me to come here, okay? So it wasn't natural to me. So I come in, I take the envelope, and I have to go da 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 da. So I'm in front of the camera. And all my instincts resisted. It's not natural. It's not natural. If I see an envelope, I go up, I pick it up, I open it. Why doesn't that work? It doesn't work for Wes. I have to go there. And so, but I could see, when he showed me the shot, I could see it worked. So I had to go, okay, I work, okay. But there was another time when I have the scene with young Zero where I realize what he's been through. I've come out of the manhole cover, and I have a scene about I'm so sorry, about, realizing what he's been through. And he had designed that shot, so I had to, it was some kind of quite long speech, and he wanted me to be over there, and over there. And I had no motivation at all that I felt to go there. I just wanted to be here. And I tried it. Wes Anderson, the great director, I must try. In the end, I did a rehearsal. And I thought, okay, I think I can make this work in rehearsal. And we came back, we rehearsed it in the day, we came back in the night to shoot it at night, and we shot, and a different adrenaline hits me because you're now doing it. The rehearsal this is real now. And it felt so contrived. I said, Wes, please, it just feels contrived. It just feels phony. He said, okay, just stand there, we'll do it like that. So that one instance, he kind of accepted. But most of the time, his blocking is very, very, very precise. And actually, I love it. I mean, I do love what he does. But within the constraints, I'll just say this, within the constraints of you can't improvise, you can't change a word, it's very, very precise, and he has a very delicate manner. I kind of like the way I wrote it, Rafe. Don't change it. I think that word is good. But then he does love you to do lots and lots of takes. So within the constraints, he loves you to find different nuances, different expressions, different little subtle emphases. And he gets that. And I love that. I love that you go again and you find and you play. So that's a little profile of Wes for you.
Thank you very much.
The last question is for you.
Thank you. Well, good evening, Mr. White.
Hello.
It's a real honor. I grew up with your films in a great deal. And my question is actually for the reader, from your role. This film came to me in a very important point of my life. And I think you had this, you could say you succeeded so well in portraying this silent despair, this suffering without expression. And I'd like to know how was the role for you, specifically? How could you actually do that? How could you express so much pain in remaining silent as the character? How was it? I think, for example, contrasting it to Grand Budapest Hotel, it's two totally different characters. And how could you actually do it?
I remember it being quite challenging because there was no explosive moment for Michael. It is this, as you say, this kind of pain inside. There is some catharsis, I think, when he meets the girl later when she's older. But I remember finding it very tough because everything was sitting inside. And it sits inside all the time. There's a moment when he goes into her prison cell, I remember that I had to be emotional. I found that very hard. I found it a very difficult part because it was, I don't know why. Some parts are just more difficult. I mean, I think if you have releases of energy, whether they are humorous or they're amorous or they're enraged or that they are release, it's the energy flows. But then this man is holding some emotional wound, and how interesting can that be? You feel like I don't get to have any fireworks. But I mean, that's where you have to trust the director, Steve. I mean, when that. Am I getting the right temperature? I mean, because there wasn't this was his constant state a lot of the time, I remember. So it was hard. So anyway, I'm glad you liked the film. but I find it hard. I have a memory of it being hard, and particularly hard because I know what happened was, I don't think it's a secret, Nicole Kidman was set to play this part and then became pregnant, and Kate Winslet then was going to play it, but she couldn't play it until much later. So all her scenes with young David Cross, they had to be postponed. So they shot a lot of my scenes, and then the film went on hiatus. And I had to wait like 6 months or 5 months before I came back to finish it. So that was another thing that was very odd. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Speaking of memories, to close this up, it's more than 30 years ago that you have been exactly in this very place. Probably one of the few times you've been in Munich was, of all places, here in the Gasteig.
Yes, this is true.
Detective.
In 1985, I was. It was my first. No, 1986. 1986. It's my second year working as a professional actor, and I had done 2 seasons of the open air theatre in Regent's Park, London, which is a summer season of open air Shakespeare, and we had a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream, and a gentleman from Munich called Pankratz von Freiburg. He's here. Pankratz, you're here. Oh. Well, Pankratz, he brought our company to the Gasteig Centre, and I had been playing a lover in the Midsummer Night's Dream, and I was promoted on tour to playing Oberon, King of the Fairies. So I premiered my Fairy King at the Gasteig Centre, thanks to Pankratz in 1986.
Perfect ending point. Thank you so much for being back again here at the Gasteig.
Thank you.
Ray Fiennes, ladies and gentlemen. Ray Fiennes.
Thank you.